I can still hear the crackle of the microphone before he opened his mouth. Margaret was never good for anything. That was it. Cold, blunt, public, in front of 200 people at our daughter's wedding. There was no hesitation, no remorse, just that arrogant voice cutting through the room like a blade, slicing my dignity on what was supposed to be the happiest day of Olivia's life. I was wearing my mother's magnolia brooch pinned to my dress, trying to honor her memory, when I felt something collapse inside me. It wasn't shame. It was a kind of emotional death. People laughed. They clapped. Some looked at each other, unsure how to react. All I remember is feeling my whole body go numb while Gregory kept going, satisfied, as if he'd just proven some brilliant point about who I was. I walked to the bathroom with my heart pounding like a drum, trying not to cry so I wouldn't ruin my daughter's makeup in the photos. But when I closed the door, my knees finally gave out. There, alone, I realized that speech wasn't a slip. It was a sentence. What Gregory didn't know, what no one knew, is that public humiliation can wound you, yes, but it also wakes you up. I walked out of that bathroom with my soul shattered, but still breathing. And 3 days later, when life finally demanded payment for everything he'd been sowing, I understood that there is a kind of justice that doesn't need to be shouted. It arrives quietly and precisely. Before I continue this story, let me ask you one thing. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to every woman who's ever been silenced by someone who said, "Relax, it's just a joke." I didn't get here because I was weak. I got here because I insisted. The kind of quiet insistence women my age know all too well. I grew up hearing my mother say, "When a woman holds a household together with love, no one notices. But when she falls, everyone talks." Maybe that's why I spent so many years believing my role was to be the foundation, not the light. And that's exactly how my marriage to Gregory began. Me holding the world up, and him holding up his own image. In the beginning, I romanticized it. I thought it was normal. I thought it was love. I thought it was partnership. Today, I see it was already the beginning of a crooked story. I worked at the community library while raising Olivia, running the house, and watching Gregory move through the world as if he owned every room he stepped into. He was charming in public, the type who knows how to shake hands, make jokes, compliment strangers. In private, the charm dissolved. Small criticisms started appearing, about my body, my personality, my choices. Nothing that left visible marks. But each comment planted a doubt. Each silence erased a piece of me. And I, afraid of creating conflict, buried everything, pushed it aside, pretended to forget. Or tried to. When we divorced, I thought I would finally have peace. I didn't want war. Didn't want a battle. I just wanted to live my life, rebuild my days, and learn to look in the mirror without feeling like I constantly owed something to someone. And for a while it worked. Gregory seemed indifferent, even distant, like he'd found another stage to shine on. I mistook that for freedom. Little did I know it was just the intermission before the storm. Olivia's wedding, however, was the dividing line. I helped her plan every detail. The flowers, the music, the keepsakes, everything chosen with love. I pinned the magnolia brooch to my dress like someone carrying a small shield. I thought Gregory would show up with grace, maybe even respect. But when he walked into that hall, I noticed something strange in his eyes. It wasn't fatherly joy. It was vanity. Competition. He couldn't stand the idea of an event where I might exist with dignity. What I didn't know yet was that the wedding night would be the spark, the one that ignited something much bigger, something he'd been building long before I realized it. His speech didn't fall out of nowhere. It landed like a stone thrown by someone who already had aim, target, and intention. When Gregory picked up the microphone, I felt a chill climb from my feet to the back of my neck. It wasn't intuition. It was recognition. I knew that look. The same he used before making those harmless comments that always hurt, but were never admitted as violence. Except that night, he didn't want to hide it. He wanted a show. I need to say something about the mother of the bride. That's how he started. The room fell silent. I smiled, trying to appear calm, but my hands trembled slightly against my dress. The magnolia brooch glimmered under the warm light, and for a fleeting second, I thought about my mother, how she taught me to hold myself with dignity in public. It was the last gentle feeling I had before everything collapsed. This woman was never good for anything. The sentence hit the room like an electric shock. Some people laughed, thinking it was a joke. Others widened their eyes. Some looked away out of secondhand embarrassment. I felt the impact like a blow to the chest. And he kept going. Much more. Not as a wife, not as a mother. Olivia's face changed instantly. She froze, like time itself had stopped around her. And in the middle of that silent chaos, I saw something that cut deeper than the words. Gregory was pleased. He was enjoying every second, as if each insult fulfilled some twisted mission. I left the room. I didn't run. I walked, because running would look weak, and I had learned my whole life never to appear in any way that could be used against me. But when I entered the bathroom, my hands finally gave out. I gripped the sink, trying to remember how to breathe. The sounds of the reception kept going outside. Laughter, music, conversation. But inside that little room, everything was muffled except the sound of someone trying not to fall apart. I looked at myself in the mirror, my face done up for my daughter's wedding, and realized that behind the makeup were years of swallowed hurts. Years of accepting small humiliations to keep the peace. Years of believing dignity meant tolerance. And right there in that bathroom, I realized that what he had done wasn't just humiliation. It was a weapon. When I left, I avoided eye contact. Some people tried to hug me, others couldn't bear to look, but most pretended everything was fine. That's how the world treats women like me. It watches us crumble and thinks the party can simply go on. But the night didn't end there. Hours later, while I was trying to wash the pain off in a hot shower, my niece sent me a message. "Auntie, the video of the speech went viral. It's everywhere." I didn't understand at first, but when I opened the internet, there it was. Gregory, in HD, humiliating me in front of hundreds of thousands of strangers. The comments multiplied fast. What a disgusting man. Where was the daughter? Why didn't anyone defend her? What felt like total destruction was actually the first crack in his plan. What Gregory tried to use to annihilate me became evidence. Public, recorded, permanent. But I didn't know that yet. The next morning, Olivia knocked on my door, her face wrecked with guilt. "Mom," I froze. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there. She cried again as if apologizing for a crime she didn't commit. I held her, even through my own chaos. But as I tried to comfort her, a question pierced through me. Why did Gregory do this? And why on that day? The answer came quickly, and it was far darker than I expected. The morning after the wedding, the house felt unfamiliar, as if the walls still carried the echo of everything that happened the night before. I made coffee on autopilot, clinging to routine the way someone clings to a floating piece of wood after a shipwreck. But every sip tasted like a bitter reminder. The video was still circulating online. I'd stumble across it unintentionally, shared by friends, by acquaintances, by complete strangers who would never know my name but commented as if they understood my entire life. What shocked me wasn't the exposure. It was the fact that for the first time, the world was seeing who Gregory truly was. And strangely, that gave me a certain strength, as if his mask had finally cracked, just not enough. There was something behind that speech that didn't make sense. Why such a violent attack? Why that day? Why that way? Those questions circled in my mind until my phone rang. It was Daniel. He never called that early, and his tone wasn't one of simple concern. "Margaret, we need to talk." The video reached me, but I found something else you need to see. Before I met him, Olivia showed up, her face swollen from crying. "I froze, Mom. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there." She sat next to me and began crying again, as if begging forgiveness for something she couldn't control. I placed my hand over hers and said, "Sweetheart, he knew you would freeze. He counted on it." She looked at me like that idea was both absurd and painful. And in that moment, I noticed the first clear sign. Gregory wasn't just trying to hurt me emotionally. He was using our daughter as a piece in a game only he understood. When I arrived at Daniel's office, he was already waiting with a hard expression. He placed a folder on the table. "Margaret, over the last 2 months, Gregory tried to access old settlement documents, requested copies of contracts, property values. He even tried to request a review of a property already in your name." My stomach flipped. "Why would he do that now?" I asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Because he's preparing something. And that wedding speech wasn't a reaction. It was strategy." The word strategy landed like a weight. Suddenly, everything made terrible sense. He didn't want to humiliate me. He wanted to discredit me, to build a narrative, to use that public humiliation as proof that I was unstable. emotionally unfit, incapable of managing my own assets. And the worst part? I recognized that type of manipulation, not because someone taught me, but because I lived under it for years. Gregory always made everything seem like my fault, always used my silence against me, always knew how to shrink me without raising his voice. The second sign came soon after. When I left Daniel's office, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't be digging into this." No name, no photo, but the tone. The tone was his. The exact tone Gregory used when he wanted to control me without appearing controlling. A tone that said, "I decide, I know, I own." The third sign came that same night. My neighbor, who never involved herself in anything, knocked on my door. "Margaret, I heard Gregory last night in the hallway of his building. He was talking loud on the phone, said you were discredited now, and that he was ready to take care of unfinished business." Unfinished business. Is that what he called the plan to erase my life? I closed the door, touched the magnolia brooch on my coat, and felt something shift inside me. A clarity, a click. As if the instinct I had spent years suppressing was finally waking up. Gregory wasn't improvising. Gregory was executing. And for the first time ever, I was ready to see every move. That night was the first in many years when I truly couldn't sleep. Not out of fear, but because my mind was finally awake. Every sentence Gregory had said, every silence he'd used as a weapon, every old humiliation I'd shoved into dark corners came back with razor-sharp clarity. It was as if all the puzzle pieces I'd avoided assembling were suddenly clicking into place, and I knew I had to follow that trail before he made his next move. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a notebook, something I hadn't done since the divorce. I always believed paper held too many memories, but that night, that was exactly what I needed. To register, organize, connect. I wrote motive, recent actions, and pattern across the top of the page and began listing everything I knew. The humiliation wasn't impulsive. The attempts to access old documents, the effort to reevaluate the property, the strange messages, his obsession with appearing victorious, his dependence on the idea that I was fragile. And in the middle of that cold analysis, one question cut through everything. What exactly was he trying to take from me? The settlement was done. The divorce was final. There was no logical reason for a war unless there was something more, something I hadn't noticed, something he was hiding. I pulled out the divorce folder I hadn't opened in years. The scent of old paper drifted up as I flipped through the documents with shaking hands. That's when I spotted a detail I'd never paid attention to before. A long-term investment made in my name more than 15 years ago, one that could only be withdrawn once it fully matured. I vaguely remembered it. Gregory had convinced me to let him handle everything at the time. But now the investment was close to maturity, and it was worth a significant amount. My heart pounded. Suddenly, the motive was no longer blurry. It was clear. Gregory had never accepted that the account was in my name, never accepted that something he believed he controlled was legally mine. And now, with the viral video, he believed it was the perfect time to build an argument, to prove to the world and to the court that I was incompetent. Just as I processed that, my phone vibrated. It was Daniel. "Margaret, I found something you need to know. Gregory tried, 2 weeks ago, to access that investment, without authorization. There was no doubt anymore. He wasn't reacting emotionally. He was preparing a financial hit. First, he discredits the victim. Then he manufactures a narrative of incapacity. Finally, he attempts to take the asset." I closed my eyes and inhaled sharply, feeling the full weight of the truth settle into my bones. My intuition, muted for years, was now screaming. He wasn't going to stop, not on his own. At that moment, a memory surfaced. A coworker months earlier had mentioned cases of ex-spouses committing financial fraud after divorce. I remembered laughing and saying, that would never happen to me. And now I was sitting in the center of something that felt straight out of a criminal law textbook. I stood up and touched the magnolia brooch pinned to my coat. The cool metal grounded me, and my mother's voice echoed in my memory. "When life pushes you, plant your feet." And for the first time since the wedding, that's exactly what I did. I stood firm. I thought clearly. I saw the entire truth. Gregory wasn't just attacking me. He was preparing to take everything. And I was just beginning to understand how far he was willing to go. The next morning, the world still felt heavy. But for the first time, I didn't feel small. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, reflecting off the magnolia brooch I had left on the table, as if the light insisted on touching it. It was symbolic, almost deliberate. My mother used to say that courage doesn't arrive like a storm. It comes like a thin ray of sunlight slipping through a crack, quiet, but persistent. And that brooch now felt like my crack of light. Daniel arrived around 9. He always rang the doorbell gently, respectfully, like someone who understands they're stepping into a fragile moment in someone's life. When I opened the door, he simply said, "We need to talk carefully." And that was enough for my heart to speed up. We sat in the living room as he placed a new folder on the table. "Margaret, I reviewed everything I found last night, and there's a pattern." He opened the folder carefully, like someone defusing a bomb. "Gregory tried to access that investment 3 times in the last month. 3. He lifted his gaze. "This isn't carelessness. It's intent." The air seemed to thicken. "Daniel, do you think—" He interrupted gently. "I don't think. I know. The wedding humiliation was part of the plan." The sentence hit hard. "He needed to destabilize your reputation, Margaret. He needed you to look emotionally weak, confused, incapable." My throat tightened. That was my greatest fear. Not just losing assets, but losing my identity. Being turned into someone I wasn't. Being rewritten by him. Daniel continued. "I've seen this before. Ex-husbands creating narratives to overturn agreements. But in your case, there's an aggravating factor. You have money involved that he always considered his." I closed my eyes. Memories flooded back. Arguments where Gregory talked as if our entire life was his achievement, as if I were just a supporting character. When I tried to open my own account and he laughed, the way he'd go silent whenever I questioned financial decisions, everything now made brutal sense. "So what do I do?" I asked quietly. Daniel exhaled, the kind of breath someone takes before shifting the direction of the war. "You won't face this alone, and he is not going to dictate the pace." He outlined a plan with surgical precision. "Officially register the wedding video as evidence of public defamation. Document every unauthorized access Gregory attempted. Legally protect the long-term investment in my name. Bring in a prosecutor who specialized in moral and financial abuse. Margaret, I know someone who can turn your case into a legal milestone. Her name is Evelyn Crowley." The name sounded firm, confidence in sound form. Before I could respond, Daniel added, "But you need to understand something before we move forward. You will hear things that hurt. You'll see documents that wound. And at some point, Gregory will try to manipulate you again. He'll show up with charm, guilt, tears, promises. It's always the same cycle." My hands trembled slightly. Daniel noticed and glanced at the magnolia brooch on the table. "Use this as your anchor," he said. "You need something emotional to hold on to. Something that reminds you who you truly are, not who he tried to say you were." I picked up the brooch. The cool metal helped clear my mind. My mother's voice echoed inside me. "You weren't born to be a shadow. You were born to be a root." When I lifted my face, I felt something fully awaken inside me. "Daniel, schedule the meeting with the prosecutor. I'm ready." And for the first time since the wedding, that sentence didn't feel like forced bravery. It felt true. The meeting with Prosecutor Evelyn was scheduled for the next morning, but fate, or Gregory, decided to get ahead of us. It was early evening when I heard knocking at the door. Not the kind of knock you expect from a visitor. It was heavy, authoritative, impatient. The kind of knock meant to intrude. I knew instantly who it was. I opened the door cautiously. Gregory stood there, jaw clenched, wearing that crooked smile I knew too well. The one he always used before unleashing emotional damage. "Can we talk?" he asked, as if he still had any right to my time, my silence, my space. "Not without Daniel present," I replied. He laughed, loudly, mockingly, as if I had just told the most absurd joke in the world. "Oh, Margaret, you're still so dramatic. Always needed someone to tell you what to do. That's why you never managed anything on your own." It was bait. The same bait he'd used for years. Rewrite my history, shrink me, make me doubt reality. But this time, I didn't bite. "What do you want, Gregory?" He stepped inside without permission. Walked to the center of the living room, scanning the space like he was evaluating it, measuring the size of my supposed weaknesses through my furniture. He'd always done that, turning objects into arguments against me. "I know you've been digging into papers. I know you've been talking to lawyers." He pointed a finger at me like I was a disobedient child. "And you're going to stop. Now." I breathed slowly. "I'm not doing anything wrong." He took 2 steps toward me, the posture he used to dominate with his presence. Margaret, you don't understand what you're getting into. You never did. Those investments, those documents, none of it exists without me. You know that. You've always known. Pure gaslighting. Old technique. Just sharpened with time. But what he didn't expect was that while he spoke, my hand slid discreetly into my coat pocket, curling around the magnolia brooch. My anchor, my reminder that the woman he once controlled was gone. You're mistaken, Gregory. He laughed again, but this time nerves cracked through the sound. Mistaken? Me? Margaret? Please. You wouldn't survive a legal battle. You barely survived a speech. The whole world saw it. You froze. You cried. You ran. How do you think a judge will see you? Unstable. Fragile. Every word strategically placed to bruise. So that's why you did it, I said. That speech was part of the plan, wasn't it? To make me look incompetent. For the first time, he faltered. A tiny hesitation. His eyebrow dropped a fraction. His breath caught. You're imagining things, he snapped. You always exaggerate. You always create drama. Another tactic. Shift blame. Rewrite reality. But now I had facts. I had Daniel. I had Evelyn. I had Aaron. I had Chloe. I had documents. I had recordings. I had the truth. Gregory, I said, my voice steady, this house isn't a stage, and I'm not your audience anymore. He went still. Then, slowly, he walked toward the door. Before stepping out, he turned back and delivered the threat completely unmasked. If you keep going, you'll regret it. The door slammed. The house fell silent. But for the first time, that silence wasn't fear. It was preparation. Because as soon as he left, I realized something important. The first confrontation was over, and I didn't fall. He backed down. After Gregory's visit, the house felt coated with a strange metallic tension. Not real, but emotional. The kind of residue left behind when someone dangerous crosses a threshold. Women who've lived with emotional violence know this sensation well. The body senses danger long before the mind names it. I closed the windows, took a slow breath, and sat in the living room chair, gripping the magnolia brooch in my palm like a small inherited truth. It reminded me that I wasn't alone inside this story anymore, not even within myself. But something didn't add up. His arrival at my door had been too rushed, too desperate. Gregory never did anything impulsively. He planned his cruelty. He rehearsed his charm. He engineered outcomes. So why had he shown up before the meeting with Evelyn? Why did he sound anxious instead of arrogant? What exactly was he afraid I would find? That question was still unraveling in my mind when my phone vibrated. Daniel. We need to meet. I found something serious. Very serious. I drove to his office. He was already standing by the door, tense, sorting through papers with the urgency of someone handling a live wire. When I stepped in, he closed the door quickly. Margaret, look at this. He spread a set of documents across the desk. What is this, Daniel? He exhaled, the kind of breath someone takes before dropping bad news. Companies. 3 of them. All opened in the last few months. And guess where they're registered? My pulse quickened. At the address of the property you and Gregory disputed in the settlement, the one he tried to reclaim. He's using a property that's legally mine as headquarters for shell companies? Daniel nodded grimly. And worse, these companies have already issued invoices to a partner, a man named Lowell Grant. The name didn't ring a bell. Who is he? Daniel flipped through another folder. A financier tied to suspicious operations, asset laundering, tax evasion. The kind of man no one interacts with unless they're moving money off the books. My mouth went dry. Daniel, how much money are we talking about? He handed me a page. I scanned it and felt a cold shock spread through my body. This much? Came from my accounts? He nodded. In small transactions. Over 8 years. 8 years. 8 years. My marriage was long over, but the violation had never stopped. He'd been draining me quietly all that time, through bank errors, small fixes, organizational transfers. He insisted on handling himself. Before I could recover, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. He lied to you. Look for Aaron. I can't be seen. A chill ran up my spine. Who was Aaron? Why warn me now? Daniel saw the look on my face. Margaret, what happened? I showed him the message. He frowned deeply. That sounds like someone scared, or someone who knows too much. Then, a memory hit me. Months earlier, Gregory left his phone on my kitchen counter while picking up Olivia. A notification appeared. The name Aaron M. He grabbed the phone so fast you'd think it burned him. I didn't think anything of it at the time. But now, Daniel, I think Aaron is connected to him. Daniel searched through more documents, and then froze. Margaret, look at this. He slid a deed toward me. At the bottom was a signature. Aaron Mercer. My breath caught. Mercer? Daniel. That's the same last name as Chloe. The girlfriend. The woman he claimed to love. The woman he was using. Could Aaron be her sister? A relative? Someone close to her? I asked. Daniel pressed his lips together. Or, he said carefully, someone who discovered what Gregory was doing to Chloe as well. My stomach twisted, but before I could respond, I remembered the text. He lied to you. Look for Aaron. Someone was warning me, and if Aaron was contacting me, then she wasn't in Gregory's circle anymore. She was escaping it. Another vibration, another message. Meet me tomorrow, 7 p.m., Old Medical Center parking lot. Come alone. Daniel grabbed my arm. Margaret, this could be dangerous. I know, but it could also be the only chance to see the truth from the inside. The next evening, I drove there. The parking lot was dim, half abandoned, lit by flickering yellow lamps. My heart was pounding, but I didn't turn the car around. At exactly 7, a silver sedan pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. A woman in her 40s, tired eyes, hair pulled back hastily, fear written across her face. Are you? I asked. Aaron, she said. I need to be quick. She handed me a thick envelope. This is everything about Gregory, about Lowell, about what they did to me and to Chloe, and what they planned for you. Why help me? I asked, stunned. She swallowed hard. Because I believed him once. I trusted him. He ruined my life, and now he's using my sister the same way. She doesn't know what he really is. My heart dropped. Chloe wasn't a rival. She was a puppet, a victim, a target. You have to expose him, Aaron whispered, before he drags someone else down with him. Then she drove off into the dark. I went home shaking and opened the envelope. Inside were bank transfers marked as adjustments, emails between Gregory and Lowell discussing strategy phases, fake contracts, photos from private meetings, and a transcribed voice memo where Gregory said, Margaret will never notice. She lives in her own head. She's easy. My blood burned. But one thing clicked into place. He had miscalculated. Deeply. I closed the envelope, pinned the magnolia brooch to my coat, and whispered, You made one mistake, Gregory. I'm not easy. You're the one about to fall. The name Aaron Mercer pulsed in my mind like a silent alarm. It felt as if a door had cracked open at the end of a long, dark corridor, revealing just enough light to confirm there was something far bigger hiding behind it. I left Daniel's office carrying a folder full of documents, but what weighed on me even more was the realization that Gregory's world wasn't just collapsing. Someone from the inside wanted to hand me the wreckage. Before driving home, I sat in the car for several minutes, watching the street through the windshield as if the world outside were slightly tilted. My reflection in the glass looked tired, but awake in a way I hadn't been in years. I reached for the magnolia brooch in my coat pocket. Every time I touched it, I felt something align in me, a reminder that I wasn't the version of myself Gregory tried to sculpt. Once home, I headed straight to the storage room where I kept old boxes I hadn't opened since the divorce. I found the one labeled Finances Before the Divorce pushed against the wall, covered in dust. Kneeling down, I opened it. Inside were receipts, photos, bank statements, all meticulously organized, not by me, but by Gregory. Suddenly, looking at the documents through fresh eyes, it was obvious. This wasn't organization. It was surveillance. The more he cataloged my life, the less I understood about his. As I sorted through the papers, something unexpected surfaced. A copy of an old consulting contract from 10 years ago. One name stood out immediately. Lowell Grant, the same man tied to the shell companies. But beneath that signature was another one, Aaron Mercer. A chill ran through me. They had known each other for years. Long before Chloe, long before the divorce. My phone vibrated. Unknown number again. He destroyed my family too. My breath caught. Who are you? I typed. The reply came instantly. I can't say yet. I'm being watched. But I can show you. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., Old Medical Center parking lot. My pulse hammered. It could be a trap. It could be dangerous. But something inside me, the part no longer willing to play dead, made the decision for me. Before meeting Aaron, I returned to Daniel's office to show him what I'd found. He examined the documents with a focused intensity that made my skin prickle. "Margaret, this is worse than we thought." He spread everything across the desk. The contract, the signatures, the shell corporations, the wire transfers. "This shows Gregory and Lowell were connected during your marriage, meaning the fraud didn't start after the divorce. It started during." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "And Erin wasn't just a witness. She may have been a collaborator or another victim. Neither option is good for Gregory." That night, I spread everything across my dining table, every clue pointing to a decade-long scheme. Looking at the paper trail, it became painfully clear. Gregory never lived a life with me. He lived a plan, and I had been part of the architecture. A wall, a cover story, a piece of infrastructure he thought he owned. When the clock hit 6:45 p.m. the next day, I drove to the old medical center. The air felt colder than it should have been. The parking lot lights flickered, casting long shadows across the pavement. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel, but I didn't turn back. At 7 sharp, a silver car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. A woman, mid-40s, shaken, worn, with the haunted look of someone who had been dragged through something brutal. "Erin?" I asked. She nodded quickly. "I don't have much time." She handed me a thick envelope. "This is everything. What Gregory did, what Lowell did, how they used me, how they're using Chloe, and what they planned for you." I swallowed hard. "Why help me?" Her eyes filled with a kind of pain I recognized instantly. The pain of someone who once believed a man like Gregory. "Because I trusted him. I lost everything. And now he's pulling my sister in the same way. She thinks he loves her. She has no idea he's using her to move money." My heart squeezed. Chloe wasn't the enemy. She was another woman trapped in his web. "You need to expose him," Erin whispered, "before he destroys someone else." Then she pulled away, disappearing as quickly as she'd arrived. I returned home trembling and tore open the envelope. Inside were bank statements showing small, repeated withdrawals from my accounts, emails between Gregory and Lowell discussing stages and adjustments, fake invoices, property documents altered to hide transfers, photos of meetings Gregory never told anyone about, and a printed transcription of a voice memo where he said, "She'll never see it coming. Margaret lives in her own little world. She's easy." I felt my jaw tighten. No, not anymore. I pinned the magnolia brooch to my coat, stood up straight, and whispered, "You've underestimated the wrong woman, Gregory. Your world is about to collapse." I arrived at the courthouse on a gray morning, the kind where the sky feels heavy, but the air is still, like the world is holding its breath. Before stepping out of the car, I touched the magnolia brooch fastened to my coat collar. It wasn't decoration. It was ritual. Every time my fingers brushed that cold metal, I remembered that I wasn't walking into that building as a broken woman. I was walking in as someone who survived, someone who pieced herself back together. Daniel walked beside me, carrying the folder with Erin's documents as if it were packed with explosives. "Ready?" he asked. "No," I answered honestly. "But I'm here anyway." He smiled softly. That's what being ready is. The room where we would meet the prosecutor was smaller than I imagined. Faint smell of coffee, legal paper, fluorescent lighting that made everything look washed out. But when Evelyn Crowley walked in, the entire space shifted. She wasn't imposing by force. She was imposing by presence. Tall, sharp-eyed, hair tied back without pretense, dressed with the kind of simplicity that signals confidence rather than lack of effort. She extended her hand. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, "I've seen terrible things, but what was done to you is sophisticated in a way that deeply irritates me." In that moment, I knew she wasn't just taking my case, she was owning it. We sat. Daniel opened the folder and began laying everything out. The wedding video, the humiliation, my exit, the viral comments. Evelyn didn't blink or flinch. She watched as if analyzing a crime scene. Then came the documents. Years of small withdrawals, forged signatures, the shell companies registered under my old address, the transfers between Gregory and Lowell, the emails, the altered property records, every piece a new fracture in the carefully built image Gregory had crafted. Daniel spoke clearly, methodically. He humiliated her publicly to establish a narrative of instability, then tried to alter her financial credibility. He created a pattern of emotional sabotage and financial dependency designed to justify future legal claims. Evelyn took notes with quick, precise strokes. Occasionally, she looked at me, not with pity, but with the kind of recognition women reserve for other women who have survived something calculated. "And this," Daniel said finally, placing the envelope from Aaron on the table, "is the internal breach. Her testimony, plus the recordings, plus the documents, show premeditation." Evelyn opened the folder, brows tightening as she scanned the content. Emails, voice memos, altered forms, Lowell's connections, Aaron's warnings, and Gregory's own words. When she finished reading, she leaned back, exhaled, and said, "Margaret, there are two types of abusers I see, the ones who explode and the ones who build. Your ex-husband is a builder, and builders always leave traces. The more elaborate the plan, the easier it is to expose." Her voice sharpened. "This is no longer a divorce conflict. This is a textbook case of moral and financial violence, and I want this case." I felt something shift inside my chest. Not triumph, not relief, validation. For years I had been told I was dramatic, sensitive, imagining things, and now a seasoned prosecutor was giving those things names. "But I don't want to destroy him," I whispered. "I just want him to stop. I want Olivia safe. I want peace." Evelyn leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Justice isn't destruction, it's consequence. You're not asking for anything more than the truth to be seen." I closed my eyes for a moment. The wedding replayed in my mind. The laughter, the crack in the microphone, the moment my knees hit the bathroom floor, then the quiet strength of this room, of these people standing with me. "What do we do now?" I asked. Evelyn outlined it as if she had rehearsed it in her mind. "First, I file a formal complaint. Defamation, financial fraud, falsification of documents, attempted misappropriation, and possibly criminal conspiracy. Second, I request an emergency order protecting your assets and reputation. Third, we secure a statement from Aaron and contact Chloe carefully. Fourth, we freeze the shell companies. And finally, we prepare for confrontation." A small smile crossed her lips. "Men like Gregory always think they're smarter than everyone else. That arrogance is our greatest advantage." I looked down at the brooch. My mother's magnolia. Her voice echoing, "You weren't born to be someone's shadow." When we left the courthouse, the cold air hit my face, but it didn't sting. I wasn't victorious yet, but I wasn't prey anymore. Gregory had taken the microphone at that wedding, but now, I had the law, and I had women beside me who knew exactly how to use it. In the days following our meeting with Evelyn, something subtle shifted around me. Not quite fear, more like motion, the kind of motion that starts when an abuser senses they're losing control over the narrative they've carefully managed for years. And Gregory felt it. I knew he did. Men like him always sense when the person they used to manipulate stops bending. One Thursday afternoon, while I was sorting documents across the kitchen table, the phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, thinking it might be Evelyn or someone from the court. But the voice on the other end froze my spine. Not because I was scared, but because it was so painfully familiar. Margaret. It was him. Smooth, controlled, calculated. The voice he used when he wanted to sound reasonable, right before twisting the knife. "Can we talk?" "You're not supposed to be calling me," I replied. My voice was steady, even though my hand trembled. I gripped the magnolia brooch in my pocket until the metal bit into my skin. "Oh, come on," he laughed, that mocking, oily laugh. "Are we doing this now? Acting like enemies? Turning a misunderstanding into a war? You've always been like this, Margaret. Tiny situations, huge dramas. What do you want? To stop you from making a mistake." That line, that cursed line, he'd used it on me for years. Behind it was always the same message. "Stop thinking. Let me decide." "I know you've been messing with things you don't understand," he continued. "Daniel's manipulating you. That prosecutor wants to make a name off my back. You don't need to get dragged into this. You just need to stop." The word stop hit like a command. "Gregory, I know about the companies, about Lowell, about the unauthorized transfers, about the attempts to get into my accounts, and I know you're trying to flip this into my fault." Silence. Cold. Long. Heavy. Not the silence of surprise. The silence of calculation. "You actually think anyone's going to believe you?" he finally said. "A woman who falls apart in public over a joke? Someone who can't handle a speech? You saw the comments, didn't you? Do you really think a judge will see you as stable? Classic gaslighting. Weaponized, practiced, but this time it didn't land the way he wanted. I have evidence, Gregory. Oh, evidence, he scoffed. You don't understand how this works. I've always been 3 steps ahead of you. Always. The only reason you're even seeing pieces now is because other people are dragging you along. Even then, you have nothing. I quietly switched the call to speaker and started recording, just like Evelyn had drilled into me. He will try to silence you. Record everything. His arrogance will give you more than any investigator could. You stole from me, I said. I what? He snapped, his composure cracking. Watch your words, Margaret. You opened companies at my address. You moved money that wasn't yours. You used fake names. You used Aaron. You used Chloe. And you tried to destroy my reputation publicly so you could justify all of it. I know. The weight of naming things out loud landed between us like a split in the floor. Naming is power. And for the first time, he was hearing his story from my mouth, not his. You have no idea who you're dealing with, he whispered, voice dropping into something darker. If you keep this up, things will happen. Things you can't control. I can be very convincing. You remember that. There it was, not even disguised as concern. A threat, clean and sharp. Gregory, I'm not alone anymore. His breathing changed. He heard the difference. Daniel, Evelyn, Aaron, Chloe, the video, the transfers, the emails, the companies, the recordings. He realized in that second that the web he'd spun for so long was starting to tangle around him. So he made his last pivot, the one he always relied on, charm. Margaret, I know I made mistakes. Maybe I went too far. Maybe the speech was unnecessary. I'd had too much to drink. I was upset. I never meant to hurt you. I hung up. No goodbye. No explanation. No space for him to twist my reaction. My knees finally gave out, and I slid into the nearest chair. My body shook, not because I was afraid, but because my nervous system was remembering years of damage. Surviving that kind of manipulation doesn't mean it stops echoing in your body. Minutes later, I sent the recording to Evelyn and Daniel. Their replies came almost at the same time. From Evelyn, excellent. This shifts our entire strategic axis. From Daniel, he's scared. That's good. But the night wasn't finished rearranging itself. At 10 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message. From Chloe. He just told me you're out of control. Is that true? Can we talk? I need to show you something. My heart paused. Chloe wasn't coming as a rival. She was coming as someone who had finally realized she was inside the same web. And that meeting, I didn't know it yet, would be the thread that unraveled the whole design. Chloe arrived at my door with her makeup smudged, her breathing unsteady, and a look in her eyes that I recognized instantly. The look of someone who had finally realized she'd been living inside a lie. When I opened the door, she hesitated on the threshold, as if stepping into my house meant crossing into a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to face. I gestured for her to come in. She clutched her phone like it was the last stable thing she had. I need you to see this, she said, her voice trembling. Before he realizes I found it. She unlocked her phone and opened a folder labeled simply, Recordings. My stomach tightened. She pressed play. Gregory's voice filled the room, cold, confident, calculating. She's emotionally unstable. If I push a little harder, she'll break down in public. Then I'll request a revision of the settlement for incapacity. Olivia will side with me. Margaret always drowns in her emotions. This will be easy. I felt the floor tilt. Not from shock, but from confirmation. Everything I'd suspected, every instinct I'd swallowed, every humiliation he'd used as weapon. It was all intentional, engineered. Chloe paused the audio, her eyes shining with tears. He said he loved me, she whispered. But he also told Lowell he only needed me to look like a stable family man for the new contracts. He said, you were the obstacle. My throat tightened, not in jealousy, in recognition. Another woman used, another woman lied to, another woman turned into a prop. For years, I thought Chloe was my replacement. Now I saw she was another victim. Why are you showing me this? I asked gently. Her voice cracked. Because he told me that if anything went wrong, he'd blame it all on me. He said I was disposable, just like he said about you. I placed a hand on her back. She flinched at first, then melted into the gesture. the way someone does when they can't remember the last time kindness wasn't conditional. And something inside me shifted. Chloe wasn't my enemy. Gregory was the architect. We were both debris from the same explosion. I called Daniel and Evelyn immediately. They arrived within an hour, stepping into the house with laptops, folders, pens, the tools of a different kind of war. Chloe sat on the couch between us, hands shaking as she replayed audio after audio, conversations with Gregory, exchanges with Lowell, screenshots of instructions, photos of documents he told her to hold for him, recordings she took without understanding their meaning, until now. Evelyn listened to everything in silence, her expression sharpening with every new detail. When Chloe finished, Evelyn stood up and pressed her palms together like someone preparing for surgery. "This changes everything," she said. "This isn't just moral and financial abuse anymore. This is premeditated incapacity framing, fraud, conspiracy, and coercion. And now you," she looked at Chloe, "are our inside witness." Chloe swallowed hard. "I'm scared." "That means you understand the danger," Evelyn replied. "But it also means you understand the importance." Daniel mapped a full timeline on my kitchen table. Dates, transactions, companies, meetings, calls. Evelyn circled patterns, linking them to legal definitions. Chloe recounted conversation after conversation. I sat with the magnolia brooch in my hand, grounding myself, connecting the dots between past and present, between every humiliation I endured and every calculation Gregory had made behind my back. After hours of building the case, Evelyn outlined the strategy with surgical clarity. "Here's how we move. Step 1, file the digital evidence immediately so Gregory can't destroy anything. Step 2, submit an emergency petition to block all assets tied to his companies. Step 3, record Chloe's full testimony. Audio, video, dates, corroborations. Step 4, trigger a judicial freeze on any account related to Gregory and Lowell. Step 5, send Gregory a formal notice that appears conciliatory, something that lures him into thinking he still has control. Step 6, set a meeting in which he believes he'll negotiate a truce. Step 7, let him talk. He will incriminate himself," Evelyn said. "Men like Gregory always do. All we need to do is give him a stage and let him believe he's still the puppeteer." Daniel nodded. "He won't see this coming." Chloe wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and said, "I want to help bring him down." I placed the brooch on my coat, its weight both grounding and awakening. "Then this is where the counterattack begins," I said. "Not with revenge, not with anger, with truth and strategy, and women refusing to be pawns. Tomorrow," Evelyn said, gathering her files, "we make the first move." And as the door closed behind them, I whispered into the quiet house, "Gregory, you're not the one 3 steps ahead anymore." The morning of the climax felt different. The air outside was thick and still, like the world itself was bracing for impact. I woke earlier than usual, not from anxiety, but from a strange clarity, as if something inside me knew that today, one way or another, a door would close. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I reached for the magnolia brooch on my nightstand and ran my thumb over its worn metal surface. It was cold, familiar, steady. That little piece of silver had seen me through humiliation, confusion, disbelief. Today, it would watch me through justice. The plan was set. Evelyn and Daniel had spent half the night perfecting it, anticipating every possible reaction Gregory might have. The idea wasn't to corner him violently, but to let him walk into his own trap while believing he still held the strings. For men like Gregory, the greatest weapon you can give them is an illusion of control, and then quietly record what they do with it. We arranged a so-called informal meeting in a neutral workspace downtown. Gregory believed it was an opportunity to de-escalate things before lawyers made it ugly. He thought he'd be negotiating my silence, maybe offering me some crumbs in exchange for backing off. What he didn't know was that the room had hidden recording equipment, the building was filled with officers on standby, and Evelyn herself was just a wall away, listening to every word. I dressed simply. Dark slacks, a soft blouse, a neutral coat. No armor, no drama, just me. The brooch pinned near my collarbone glinted softly in the mirror. For a brief moment, I searched my own reflection, looking for the woman Gregory always described. Fragile, overwhelmed, incapable. She wasn't there. The woman in the mirror looked tired. Yes, but grounded, present, whole. At the co-working building, I walked down the hallway with slow, deliberate steps. Daniel squeezed my shoulder gently before veering off into the adjacent room where Evelyn and the officer were waiting. Remember, he said, you don't need to provoke him. Just let him be who he really is. That, I thought, is the easiest part. I stepped into the small conference room and closed the door behind me. The room was simple. White walls, a rectangular table, 4 chairs, a glass panel facing the corridor. Nothing dramatic, nothing staged, just ordinary enough to lower anyone's guard. I heard his footsteps before I heard his voice. Gregory's walk always betrayed him. A little too confident, a little too loud, like he wanted every floorboard to remember he'd been there. The door opened. He stepped in. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. He had the same carefully curated look as always, shirt ironed, hair styled, that cologne he wore to make sure people noticed him before he even spoke. He smiled, an expression I'd once mistaken for charm but now recognized as nothing more than posture. "Margaret," he said, as if my name belonged to him. "Gregory," I replied evenly. He moved toward the table, placing his jacket on the back of a chair, adjusting his cuffs like a man about to close an important deal. In a way, that's exactly what he thought he was doing. "I'm glad you agreed to this," he said. "I've been hearing some concerning things about what you've been up to. Lawyers, complaints. I thought we could resolve this like adults." What he meant was, like he dictated. I sat down, folding my hands calmly on the table. "I'm here to listen," I said. "Are you?" He laughed softly. "I've always listened to you, Margaret. The problem is you've never known how to interpret anything correctly. The old script, the one he relied on whenever he felt the ground shifting. Make me doubt my perception. Make reality negotiable. Not today. I understand enough," I said. "But go ahead. Say what you came to say." He leaned back in his chair, legs crossed, hands folded across his stomach in a pose that screamed casual superiority. "Look," he began, "this whole situation is escalating more than it needs to. The video from the wedding got out of hand. People online love to overreact. You know how it is. But you're making it worse by feeding this narrative that I'm some kind of monster. We both know it was a joke. Poorly timed, maybe, but still a joke." I didn't blink. "You humiliated me on our daughter's wedding day." "You humiliated yourself," he corrected smoothly. "You took it the wrong way. You always do. That's your problem. You're sensitive. And now you're letting other people, Daniel, that prosecutor, weaponize your sensitivity." I stayed quiet, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. He continued, tightening his jaw just a little. "You're going to hurt yourself if you keep pushing this. Lawyers will dig into your past, your moods, your behavior. They'll bring up every bad day you've ever had. Is that what you want? You think a court is going to look at you and see someone stable?" He said stable, like a threat. "Is that why you made that speech?" I asked slowly. "To make sure no one ever sees me as stable again?" His eyes flickered just for a moment. "Don't start that again," he said. "It was a comment. People laughed. You could have laughed too. But you stormed off crying, making a scene, like always." I felt my fingers close around the underside of my chair. "Like always," I repeated. "Interesting. And the companies in my name? The accounts? The transfers? Were those jokes too?" He exhaled sharply through his nose, annoyed. "Those companies are legal. Everything I've done is to protect our assets, which, by the way, I built. You forget that. Without me, you wouldn't have half of what you own. And now you're turning against me over technicalities." Technicalities. He called theft technicalities. "Gregory, why did you need me to look incompetent?" I asked. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You really want to know?" "Yes. Because," he said, voice dropping, "you are incompetent when it comes to money. I just decided to stop pretending otherwise. If I could show that you were emotionally unstable, legally overwhelmed, then I could finally manage things the way they always should have been managed, without you interfering." There it was. Not wrapped in charm, not dressed up as concern, just the naked core of his logic. "And the wedding?" I asked. "The joke?" "A catalyst," he said. "A push. People had to see who you really are." A spark of heat rose in my chest, but I kept my tone even. "Who I really am," I repeated. "And who are you, Gregory?" He smirked. "Someone who can still fix this if you stop dramatizing everything. We don't need courts. We don't need prosecutors. I can make all this go away. I can forget what you're trying to do. We can sign some adjustments, move certain assets, and you can go back to your quiet life. No one has to see how far out of your depth you went." He thought he was rescuing me. He was burying himself. "Tell me something," I said. "Did you ever actually think of me as a partner?" He shrugged. "You were useful, for a time. You looked good on my arm. You kept the house in order. You gave me Olivia. But when it came to real decisions, no. That was always my role, and deep down you know that." I stared at him. Not the way I once did, searching for the man I thought he was, but the way you might stare at a painting you finally see clearly after years of bad lighting. Then I asked one last question. "And the money you moved through Lowell? Through the companies? Through the property? Was that your role too?" He rolled his eyes, impatience breaking through. "I did what I had to do to secure my future. You were an obstacle, an emotional liability. I needed a way to free myself without losing everything I built." His words snapped through the air like dry branches. That was the moment. He had named it, in his own voice, in full sentences, without pressure, with intent. The door behind him opened. He flinched. Evelyn stepped into the room with quiet, controlled authority, followed by an officer and Daniel. Gregory turned, eyes wide for the first time since I'd known him. "What is this?" he demanded, rising halfway from his chair. "This," Evelyn said, placing a small recording device on the table, "is your confession, Mr. Hale. You've just admitted to intentional reputational sabotage, financial fraud, and deliberate psychological abuse designed to strip your ex-wife of her legal capacity. All recorded, all witnessed, all admissible." His face went pale. "You set me up." "No," she replied calmly. "You set yourself up. We just let you talk." The officer stepped forward. "Gregory Hale, you are being detained for questioning in connection with ongoing financial and moral crimes against Margaret Ashford, and potentially others." He looked at me as if I'd ripped the world out from under him. He expected fear. He expected a plea. He expected me to fold, like I always had. Instead, I stood up slowly, smoothing my coat. "You spent years telling me I was unstable," I said softly. "Turns out the only person who couldn't control himself was you." For a second, rage flashed across his face. Then something else, something like panic. They led him out of the room, handcuffed, still sputtering about misunderstandings, loyalty, ingratitude. His voice faded down the hallway. Silence settled. The kind of silence that doesn't accuse or suffocate. The kind that simply is. I touched the magnolia brooch at my collarbone, feeling its weight. The climax wasn't watching him lose his freedom. It was watching myself reclaim mine. For the first time in years, I walked out of a room he was in, without carrying his version of me on my shoulders. When I walked out of that room, the hallway felt brighter than it should have. There was no applause, no cinematic triumph, just a quiet, grounded certainty settling into my bones. The kind of certainty that comes when something long overdue finally happens. I stepped outside the building, and the cold air touched my face with an unfamiliar gentleness. It wasn't victory I felt. It wasn't revenge. It was release. The first full breath after years of breathing around a weight I couldn't name. Hours later, back at home, my phone rang. Evelyn. "Margaret, I wanted you to hear it directly from me," she said. "Gregory has been detained for questioning. He's not permitted to leave the city. The companies have been frozen. His accounts are under review." Her tone was professional, but beneath it I heard something else. Respect. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. When the call ended, I sank into my living room chair and let myself feel the quiet. Not peace, not yet, but the absence of fear. That was new. That was enough for now. Later that evening, the front door opened without a knock. Olivia rushed inside with tears in her eyes, breath uneven, as if she'd run the whole way. She stopped when she saw me, guilt and grief woven together on her face. "Mom!" Her voice cracked. "I saw the news. I saw everything. I didn't know. I didn't understand. I should have defended you. I should have stood next to you at the wedding. I just froze. I'm so sorry." She knelt in front of me like she used to do as a child when she'd scraped a knee and thought the world was ending. I cupped her face in my hands and felt something inside me settle. "Olivia," I whispered. "He knew you'd freeze. He counted on it. None of this was your fault." Her tears fell freely then, not from shame, but from relief. She rested her head on my lap, and I stroked her hair the way I did when nightmares woke her up at age 6. After years of fractures created by Gregory's manipulation, something between us began to mend. Not instantly, Not magically, but truthfully, carefully. Later that night, I received a short message from Chloe. Thank you. He tried calling me. I didn't answer. I'm starting over. I didn't need more words than that. Women who escape the same man often don't need long conversations. Recognition is enough. The fact that she was out of his reach, out of his shadow, was a victory I hadn't expected to care about. But I did. In the following days, Daniel guided me through each step of the legal process. Evelyn moved with precision, filing motions, securing protections, gathering statements. Gregory had arrogantly built his plans on paperwork, transfers, and digital footprints, and all of it was now unraveling under the same scrutiny he once believed he could manipulate. When the formal charges were filed, defamation, financial fraud, falsification of documents, attempted misappropriation, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, as if someone had finally opened a window in a dusty room I'd been stuck in for decades. One evening, I stepped out into the garden. The magnolia tree my mother planted years ago moved softly in the wind, its branches swaying like they were greeting me. I reached up and touched a leaf, feeling its cool, waxy texture. My mother used to say that magnolias bloom after storms, not before. I understood that now. Months passed after the day Gregory finally lost the stage he had used for so long to shrink me. Life didn't return to what it had been. It became something different, something steadier, something mine. I started waking up without that quiet fear lingering under my ribs. I walked through the rooms of my house without bracing for some invisible impact, and when I looked in the mirror, I recognized myself again. Not the woman he tried to rewrite, but the woman who had survived him. The legal process moved forward with deliberate precision. Gregory lost the fraudulent companies, was found guilty of aggravated defamation, and still faces charges for attempted financial fraud. He tried to bargain, to charm, to twist the narrative until the very end, but the truth has a gravity of its own, heavier and more resilient than any performance he could muster. When the sentence was finally announced, I felt something settle in me. Not triumph, not celebration, just alignment. My past, finally placed where it belonged. Olivia and I rebuilt our relationship with a softness I didn't expect. She calls me every morning now, sometimes just to ask if I've had my tea. Sometimes we sit together in the garden talking about things we lost along the way. Time, trust, the version of ourselves we were trying so hard to protect. Healing between us wasn't a single moment. It was a path, and we walk it together. As for me, I created a small fund for women facing moral and financial abuse. Nothing grand, nothing loud, just a hand extended to those who need guidance, support, and courage in moments when the world insists they stay silent. Because if there's one truth I earned the hard way, it's this. No woman should face a monster alone. The magnolia brooch sits on my desk now, not as armor, but as memory, a reminder that I survived what was meant to break me. Not because I was strong every day, but because I kept moving even when I was cracked open. And before I end this story, I want to speak directly to you. If you have ever been silenced, humiliated, diminished, or dismissed, there is still a turning point waiting for you. There is still justice. There is still future. If this story touched you, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I want to know you. I want to hear you. Because your voice matters, today and always.